Welcome to RT3D. My name is Alan, and in this week's video we'll be making this marvellous sculpture from Kuton figurines of Lord Toranaga from the TV show Shogun. Kuton produced some of the very best sculpts in my opinion. They don't sponsor this channel or this video, so I can say what I want about this. I was blown away by the accuracy of this model and the likeness of the actor from the show. You can also buy this figure from CG Trader if you don't fancy the Patreon option. I'll leave a link in the description below. I opted to make mine without the arrows as I just preferred that look. With the model parts already primered with their black primer and zenithal to within an inch of their lives with Vallejo white, I set about adding the brown for the trousers and the under armour areas, which is a sort of heavy woven material, and that was done with a combination of burnt umber and beastie brown both by Vallejo. Now, those of you who have already watched my Fallout Ghoul video will know that I have a particular affinity with burnt umber. And if you haven't already watched it, I'll leave a link in the top corner. Bum, as I like to call it now, was used on the layers for the wooden armour parts on the legs, arms and head. And it was only at this point that I discovered through reference photos that it was actually a different shade of colour, so I repainted those bits with a triple combo of bum, rust and white. These areas will be getting a shadow pass and highlights dry brushed onto them after this bit. Getting the colours wrong is a perennial problem and one that I normally try to avoid by obtaining lots of reference photographs beforehand, but sometimes you still get caught out occasionally. Getting the trouser colour wrong was particularly annoying as I thought I did a good job of airbrushing that the first time. You'll see later that I have to repaint two of the leg shield armour parts after getting more reference of them. For Lord Toranaga's feet, he actually looks like he has some kind of knitted sock. I'll be painting it with hardened carapace and then applying a texture later on. I don't know why, but I can never do anything all the way through in one go. I always come back and do part of this, part of that. It's just the way I am. Now, I swear I should be buying shares in burnt umber paint because I'm always running out. This is what I applied to the armour plates for the samurai's armour. The raised parts that you see on the plates here is actually laces that hold all the parts together. Painting all these parts alone took well over a day. And speaking of the laces, as you'll see later on, there are hundreds of laces on this model, and if it hadn't have been for the modeller's eyeglasses that I wear, I would be needing new eyes. These are the two armour boards I was talking about earlier that were the wrong colour. I actually found out that they were a shade of grey, not the brown that the rest of the boards are. For Toranaga's helmet, I used the wonderfully titled Beastie Brown and Burnt Umber, and these were worked up in layers to produce the final colour. And now for one of my favourite paints, Deca Colour Gold. Anytime I get to use this colour, I love it. It goes over anything and covers brilliantly. It also produces a really nice gold effect, and here it's used for all the gilt-edged stuff on his helmet. The only thing with this paint is that it tends to dry quite quickly and form a custody skin in your paint dispenser, so you have to refresh it quite often. And now we start the arduous task of painting all the knotwork in the armour. This took ages, I won't lie. There are hundreds of laces on this sculpt, each one intricately detailed, beautifully done, but there are so many of them. And I'll leave you to watch this with the nice music whilst I go and have a cup of tea. For For Toranaga's arm chainmail, I painted the chainmail with a steel colour and then used this black wash from Vallejo to sit basically in all the crevices of the armour, and it just produced a really nice effect, like a shadow effect in the armour. For all the knotwork on all the parts of the armour, I used Reikland Flesh Shade to produce this nice shadow on all the laces. It just brings a nice tone to the yellowish colour. For the tiny little ear wing parts on the helmet, I used a gory red from Vallejo to simulate the, I imagine it be like cherry wood or something. And I outlined his boot armour with titanium white and yellow ochre, which is the same colour that I used for the laces. And I imagine it would be some kind of bamboo or something in real life. I had to do these laces in various stages because I couldn't do them all in one go, because my eyes just couldn't focus for that long. I outlined the large leg shields with the same colour I'd used for the laces. I learned later that these plates were sometimes made of iron or steel and not wood as I supposed that they would be. More of the Reikland Flesh Shade now. It gives a really nice deep rich tone to the brown of the armour. It also highlights the detail and the knotwork of the laces as well. The one good thing about all these laces is that at least they're out in the open and you can see them. They're not hidden behind a cloak or something like that, which would be a real pain. Now here I come back to the long forgotten trousers and apply the dry brush of the light brown, and then I go over them with the airbrush and just put in a little hint of darkness for the shadowy areas. I used a combination of these two washes to not overpower the actual colour and just emphasise them, but just darken them a bit. If I was to have used just plain black, it would have overpowered the colour. I used the lava orange and beastie brown to emphasise the colours of the knotwork that holds together all the armour pieces, which were a slightly different colour from the other lace work. And this time I used a hull red rather than burnt umber to bring out the brown in the ties that hold together the shin guards on his legs. I painted the silk ties that hold his swords to his belt with a hardened carapace grey. I used an army painter field grey for the area around his neck. It's actually a greeny grey colour, which is really nice. And I used the same two colour combo of yellow and white for the piping around the neck, the same as the laces. I really like this umber wash. It has a nice effect where it fills in the details in all the parts you paint on top, but doesn't destroy the colour underneath. I used it on the knotwork of the armour and also on the bamboo parts of his lower legs. Decacolour gold again, but this time for the decorative parts of the chainmail on his arms and also for the decorative parts of the armour on his chest. And now to do a zenithal highlight on the head, or rather heads, as there's actually two with the sculpt. I'll concentrate mostly on the head that has the hair for this one. For skin tones, I usually start with a Warlord Purple. I spray almost the entire surface of the skin area and then apply a transparent red in the darker tone areas. You then apply the basic skin tone flesh colour in light passes, building it up in the lighter areas to produce the desired effect. Here you can see I'm attaching the head to a magnet that I have on the end of a paintbrush. That helps me paint without actually touching the surface at all. I apply the next lighter skin tone from the direction that the light would be hitting him from above. The final lightest skin tone shade is then applied in thin layers, and I then go from a shadow area with the Orcish Dermis to give back a bit of a tone to his skin. The final pass is with Reikland Flesh Shade, which I apply with a paintbrush. That brings back some of the deep tones to his skin and also makes him look a bit more tanned. I painted Lord Toranaga's hair with cold black from Acryl. Once the black is done, I'll go over his hair with a grey to give it a bit more salt and pepper to his look. I keep the paint thin in order to paint the fine hairs down the side of his head. It's important to take your time when you're painting the thin, fine hairs on the side of his head, as the black will be very difficult to paint over if it goes onto his skin tones. I painted the handle of his sword with a hull red colour as it produces a nice leather effect. I followed it up with a thicker colour gold for the hand grip guard and the tip of the handle. I wasn't too happy with how the skin tone was turning out. It was a bit too pink, so I knocked it back with some brown rose and then applied a little highlight and then finished it off with a pass with Reikland Flesh Shade. I mixed Reikland Flesh Shade 50-50 with water to give a nice thin glaze to fill in the details in his face and also to give it a little bit more of a tanned look. Lord Toranaga's lip colour is actually quite a dark shade, so I went with a purple, brown and hull red mix. This was watered down and applied in a few passes. Started off painting the eyes by painting them coal black. This produces a nice outline when the deck tan is filled in later. I left the black for a while to dry whilst I did the beard, also with the coal black. I took advantage of the flesh tone overspray on the black for the beard and his moustache with a 50-50 mix of coal black and water. This was applied over the beard and the moustache in passes until I was happy with the result. I painted his eyebrows with the coal black and a nice angry expression before going back to do the sclera with the deck tan. Eyes are one of the trickiest parts to paint for me. My depth perception isn't the best, and I have a problem with one of my eyes, and so fine detail at small sizes like this is quite tricky, but I actually managed to get the eyeballs done quite well this time. Just a tiny little dab of pure white for the spotlight in his eye, and then it was on to the grey for his hair, just to dry brush that very gradually in, little bit by bit. Next I added a glossy finish to the eyes and a satin finish to these lips. For the sock texture on his feet, I used Dungeon Grey and Field Grey, a slightly greyish grey and a greenish grey. I just wanted to produce little lines of paint to emphasise the texture in his socks. A pass with null oil shade will help differentiate between his socks and the lower legs. The ropes on his socks I painted with Hull Red, and then painted the shin armour with Decacolour Gold. I wanted to achieve a high shine on his blade, so I polished the actual resin with a glass file and got a high sheen on the actual resin itself, and then applied Mulatto chrome paint on top, and I think it turned out really well. For the last part of the build, I wanted to change the base and make it more organic and less rocky. So I actually used acrylic smart mud and applied small stones and then ballast, which is like sand, on top of it. That was then fixed in place with a quick spritz of alcohol to break up surface tension, and then when the water and glue mix was applied on top, that seeped in and fixed it all fast to the base. As I was going for a muddy, mossy forest look, I used dark flesh tone and earth mix as a base tone for the mud base. For the moss, I'm starting with the darkest greens first and gradually working my way up. I used a diluted pale green to produce a highlight effect on the moss, but not to overpower it. I then toned it down and varied the shade with a slightly darker green to just give the moss a little bit tonal variation. I added a mix of black and brown wash to give the moss a bit more of a tonal variation. painted the rocks with a base of field grey and then picked out highlights with slightly lighter shades of grey. Picked out some of the stones in the ground with varying shades of grey to give them a more realistic look. To break up some of the larger areas of moss, I used dark flesh tone to add in some mud again. I then used an earth tone to highlight some of the stones and also to highlight some of the mud areas. This was very watered down, so it seeped in. And then for a more realistic, organic look, I decided to add some leaves and twigs from when I was out with my dog for a walk. And with that, I'm calling it done. I hope you found something inspiring or helpful in this video, and if you did, why not tell everyone else you know, and drop a like and subscribe. Until next time, this has been R2-3D, and I'll see you in the next one.